Hello and welcome to another video. This video is going to be a bit longer, just like the other one. Here, let me turn this down. This is going to bother me. So in this video, we're going to go over Assassin's talents and kind of like what abilities it has and kind of like how I would rework it if I were to have an option to do that, and or just my feedback and opinions on the class. This is one of the classes that I've really wanted to do this on because I think their talent layout is atrocious, honestly. I think it's just as bad as Marauder, but I feel like Marauders makes a little bit more sense. But there are some favoring things going on for Assassin as is, so it is a toss-up. There are certain things that I just don't agree with, but regardless, since it's going to be a longer video, this is just a set it and kind of like forget it kind of video. This is not a video where anything's really going on screen, so if you just want to listen, this is one of those videos. Anyway, we're going to start out with Infiltration, which is Deception. Since I am a Republic version on this character, we're going to start with Infiltration, of course. The first thing that I really want to talk about is that, yeah, obviously the top three are going to be pretty much the same for all three specs except for tank, since there is a tank spec available for this one. It'll be slightly different. And there's a few things that I want to mention here first, just to get this out of the way. When it comes to Shroud, my opinions on Shroud is that not having Long Shroud is an abomination. I am not sure why we don't get Long Shroud. I do think the tactical for Long Shroud, maybe on tank with the actual option to take Long Shroud, would be a little obnoxious, but maybe just give them this version of Shroud and then allow them to take that tactical to then get Long Shroud, and then allow regular assassins, like DPS assassins, to actually have access to the 5-second Shroud. That would be a lot better than what it currently has. I don't really understand why it's only 3 seconds. 3 seconds is 2 globals if people are playing perfectly. Obviously, if you time that well, it's very, very good. But really, there was no reason to technically nerf the survivability of a class that already doesn't have good survivability. And on top of that, if there are some problems with Shroud and PvE, which I know that there probably is, you should really just think about changing the damage type of the PvE mob and not have it interact the same way when it comes to Shroud. There's definitely ways they can separate it. I don't understand why they're not bothering to do that, and instead they're nerfing a class. I don't agree with that. I don't think it's good. I think it's terrible. Another topic to talk about here too is that you used to have a 4-speed absorb. It was incredibly broken, especially on tanks. I don't think tanks should have had access to it. It should have been DPS only. And on top of that, it was really strong, and they nerfed it all the way down to 25%, I believe, near the last version of it. I do think that was really good, and I would love to see that come back, but I understand why it wouldn't, especially with the DR talent now available for Deception. That's actually good. Anyway, let's start with the beginning, basically. So we have an option for cooldown reduction on Vaulting Slash, which is our single target burst ability. It's also white damage, kind of like Ball Assassinate, Reaping Strike. Those are your big hitters for white damage. Having this is kind of nice. Additional force cost kind of sucks, but at the same time, our force isn't completely negative if we run this, because we can run something like this, which I do run. Then you have the armor penetration, which is cool, and the critical hit chance of Vaulting Slash goes up by 20%. This means that you are more often than not going to crit with this, which is great. And the armor penetration also means that when you're hitting a heavy armor target, you're going to have more damage, which is also good. I think that's a solid choice. And then this one's really good if you're doing a lot of like burst kills or you're killing a lot of trash mobs in the open world. However, I do think it's kind of silly being tied to Vaulting Slash, for example. Let's say, well, actually, I guess it's not too bad. Kind of like makes it an execute. And this also obviously means that you can miss out on your cooldowns, which is great. Boosts your crit hit chance by 40% for 6 seconds. It's pretty good for trash mobs and just clearing heroics. Obviously, you can get this to proc in PvP, and the value of it, it's probably questionable. You could probably get a really nice AoE discharge with it if you're able to actually manage to get this to go, but overall, a little bit of a min-max option. And I kind of like that as a an option to take to min-max things a little bit further. It does give a little bit of a different kind of like play style, but you also do lose the cooldown reduction on it, so you'll have to be a little bit more smarter about using your ulting slash. Now getting into this one, Force Magnetism. Force Cloak increases your movement speed by 50%. Don't really care about this. Force Speed lasts for 1 second longer. This is huge. And enemies within 5 meters are slowed by 75% for 2.5 seconds when activated. The slow is super nice. It's actually really strong, especially on Hatred and Darkness. On Deception, it's kind of whatever, but overall, it's not bad. You really take this for the extra duration on your force speed. This allows you to be a lot more mobile and have better chance of keeping up with pretty much anybody running away from you. The only downside really is that the fact that if you try to stealth out and you slow somebody, you're probably going to pick back up on combat, which really sucks. So this is kind of like a really weird talent. I really wish that they would just give us the extra 1 second tied to like this, for example, even though I don't agree with this being up here. That would be a really nice addition. And then have this, maybe have this tied in with something else. Really, honestly, I don't really understand why this is a talent, but at the same time, you know, it's a nice optional. It's like sometimes you may not want that slow, sometimes you might want that slow. It really just depends, and for the most part, what they could do to fix this in general is to maybe make it not slow while you're stealthed, but you know, sometimes maybe you want that. It's a tricky situation overall, and I don't have too many opinions on it, mostly just because I just don't play Assassin in a way that I really care about stealthing out and resetting. Ranked arena is not a thing anymore, so you know, it's not as important. But if there was ranked arena again, I would like to have a way to separate the force speed slow, like completely, because that was not helpful in the previous expansion, and yeah, I don't think it really belongs together. Now this is something that I don't agree with Sorcerer, and that they just get this for free, and it has the Electrobind already tied to it. I think this is not a bad talent. There's definitely some times that you'd probably take this, but overall, yeah, I don't know. 5 seconds root is crazy. I'll never agree with that. I think honestly, nothing should really last more than 3 seconds to 4 seconds, but you know, regardless, it's a solid choice. And then you have Spike with your Maul. Honestly, I don't like opening with Maul because it's not really force positive, but also at the same time, you're using a Maul that's oftentimes unprocced. It really just depends on how you open. Not a fan of that. It really creates, in my opinion, bad habits, and I would love to just see Spike come back. You know, like it's still in the game, so why not give it back to DPS? This is just kind of like one of those things where you just prune something just to prune it. Sorry, I'm still coughing a little bit here, so I'm trying to not get that on audio for you guys. Anyway, going into 39 here, we have Clairvoyant Strike talents, so they're all for Clairvoyant Strikes, which is this one, which would be Voltaic Slash, I think. Anyway, so what's going on here is that this is a cooldown reduction for your Recklessness or your Force Potency. Basically means that you can get that more often whenever you pop Recklessness or Force Potency. You get a free discharge max stack, which is great. Having this can be really nice because this means that you can get your cooldown reduction on your recklessness a lot more often. If you're basically playing AoE discharge, you can get some value out of this, but for the most part, it's usually not a talent that you take because it's going to be a net loss. The 10% critical hit chance is pretty much for everything, making it automatically like pretty much the best in slot talent that you're always going to take. You will lose a decent chunk of your damage when you have to take this one. This one will apply a slow. Don't really care about the slow, you're looking at the damage reduction. When you actually have this damage reduction, you are extremely tanky. You also get internal and elemental damage reduction, so that means you're very good at dealing with Sorks when you actually take this talent. Your damage reduction is just really, really solid with this, combined with your insulation from, what is it, this illuminous? Yeah. So having this plus the damage reduction talent, it's just really solid. I think this is a great talent. Maybe it's a little too strong, but overall, you know, I don't see a reason to nerf this because this is a frontline, like kind of like talent, and without this talent, they can't really frontline. At least not super effectively. Now, personally, I have spoken before in the previous video that I did, talking about offensive and defensive choices being in the same row. I don't like that at all. I really do feel like this should not be here. This should be somewhere else. When it comes to offensive options, if the defensive option is too much better than its like individual peers, there's pretty much never going to be a situation where people take the other option. So therefore, you've got to actually balance out the row, and if you don't balance out the row, it makes no sense. While these might be equally useful, there are a lot of times that people are just going to take the crit hit damage or the critical hit chance and totally skip over the damage reduction, which is a bad thing, but also at the same time, you know, sometimes you went to damage reduction and you're going to lack in damage. It's not a good feeling. I definitely wish that you could have both of these at the same time, or this one just doesn't exist, so you're not actually losing out on anything when you take something like this. And then here, I think this one's actually really interesting. It doesn't actually tell you how much damage the thing does, but it's actually pretty decent. And also it makes things a little bit more interesting because it allows you to get a auto crit maul again, or auto crit reaping strike. And this one's pretty much straightforward. I do think this should have been baseline. I don't understand why it's not. It's not like a crazy ability. It's not going to make or break the class. It's kind of like one of those things where I guess you kind of prune just for the sake of pruning again. And then this one is just really nice. This allows you to play a little bit more force hungry kind of like build. And it also gives you some healing, which is nice. If it was 2% healing, I don't think anybody would complain. It would definitely help its survival a little bit more, especially if it takes the DR talent. Now going into the ones that don't really change, depending on what spec you're playing, we have reduced cooldown on your cloak, which is not bad. CC immunity on deflection, whatever. And then you have AoE DR. The AoE DR is actually really strong, 60%, but the problem is that pretty much everything hurts you. And AoE damage reduction is going to help, but for the most part, you can't really value it over the other ones. I do think the sturdiness and same thing with like Blood Ward, for example, I feel like CC immunities that are tied to your defensives should probably just be baseline at this point. I don't really understand whether or not forcing us to like kind of like spec into that at this day and age seems really silly, and giving up something vital to your kit. I'm fine with Fade being a talent. I do think Fade should be a little bit better if it's going to be a talent though. And then I also feel like the AoE DR thing, I feel like honestly it should be down here with like utility based kind of things, because most of the time you're not actually going to make use of AoE DR unless you're doing PvE. And maybe sometimes when you're doing cleave games for like arena, you might find some good use to it, or if there's just a lot of AoE and AV, it's, you know, sometimes you can find use for it, but most of the time you're not even going to bother ever taking that talent. Now this one's another silly one. This whole row, honestly, in my opinion, makes no sense. Now this is a super useful and almost requirement for PvPing in general, force phase, which is immersion. This basically gives you immunity while you're force speeding. Not having this is a terrible mistake most of the time. There's a lot of slows, there's a lot of routes in the game that will make your force speed useless if you don't take this. I do think the 1 second additional could totally be tied to this, or the reduced cooldown on force speed could be tied to this. I don't really like that this is all the way up here, but at the same time, I don't really like that this is all the way up here either. I do feel like this is like something vital to your mobility. I'm fine with being a talent, but I really think they should make the choice of whether they want to put force speed last for additional second on this, or the reduced cooldown by 5 seconds on this, one or the other. Because we really don't need as many kind of like talents just to be a talent kind of thing situation. I feel like that's completely what this is, and I feel like in a way there's really no argument for why this isn't baseline. Most of the time you're pretty much always going to take this. The increased damage on rolling blow, which is your last rate, you're pretty much never going to take that on deception unless you're doing like trash mob clearing or something. Most of the time you're just not going to find value in this. At the same time, it's not a core part of your rotation when it comes to like PvP. Most of the time you're actually losing damage using this unless you're hitting 8 players. But even then, you probably don't want to be in front of 8 players, to be honest with you. Deception is not the tankiest class to be doing that. But, you know, hey, I mean, if you don't want to ever escape and you can just face tank 8 players, sure. I guess that can find some value, but for the most part, I don't feel like this belongs all the way up here. And I also don't feel like it even, for the most part, belongs as a choice to be in the same row as these, because these are mobility and this is like extra damage. What is this extra damage going to do for you when it comes to like these two? These two are actually really good. Now the other one, Connect Surge, which is phasing Phantasm for Republic, or I mean Imperial. This one's actually really good, and it's unfortunate that it's so high up here. This actually increases your mobility by quite a lot. This is like a mini second wind proc. And you can keep it up for quite a bit for most of the match. Pretty much, you can actually have this, which is incredible. And it's super unfortunate that you're not really able to afford it. Would really love to see this go somewhere else, like maybe ask us to take reduce cooldown on Cloak or Connect Surge. So in like a Warzone, instead of taking the reduce cooldown here, I'd probably take Connect Surge, and vice versa. But typically we're just going to skip over that for now, because we can definitely get lost in hypotheticals here. And going into Shroud, Lift, and Cleaving Cut. Honestly, Cleaving Cut was one of those abilities that should have just been pruned. If you want to prune for the sake of pruning, just get rid of Cleaving Cut, because when you added it into the game, you didn't put any thought into it, and it's not a useful ability, and it doesn't really do anything for us. It's also got a long animation, and the main use that it ever got was pulling people out of stealth and using it for combat, so you can get AoE discharge when you made it mandatory to use AoE discharge. Now that that's not a thing anymore, it really doesn't serve any purpose, and for the most part, it's something that you could probably take on tank just to meme with. Now, the cool thing that they did over the years was add the second part of this, Kinetic Veil. Increases the damage of your force attacks by 5% and your damage reduction by 5% for each target hit with Cleaving Cut. Problem is that it only lasts for 3 seconds. It's cool in theory. It's just one of those things that you'll just never see yourself taking over a Shroud. Anyway, Lift is cool. Shroud is pretty much mandatory. Now, another cool thing that happened with this expansion is that now when you self out, you actually get a purge, so you don't actually have to take your cloak out. Now, you can, and it's very valuable when you do. There's certain situations where you want this. but not every single time do you want this, so it's okay. And then there is this. This is such a vital and important thing for you. The extra cooldown reduction on force speed, which is your main mobility. Here we have it on 14 seconds, 15 seconds, right? Without that, it's 20. That's not a good feeling to have your main mobility be all the way up here, and then your other main mobility up here, and then like here, another one of your mobility. They have 3 different talents all for the same ability. They're all tied to your mobility, and then you also have this one also locked behind where you basically can't get it because you have to take this one. It doesn't feel good. As a class, it is a glass cannon. Well, I know it is focused on CC a little bit, especially if it had spike back. Maybe spike should always be tied to like maybe a mobility option, so they give up some mobility for it. But at the same time, being a glass cannon, I really don't like the idea of like losing all of your mobility for the sake of like survivability or damage. And then our last one, this one is really interesting, and you can kind of get it to work in PvP, but also at the same time you can also make use of this a lot in PvE when you're clearing trash mobs, so can find some value. Don't think it belongs all the way up here, but you know, a lot of this just doesn't make sense in general, so we're just not going to question it at this point. We're just going to go with it, and yeah. Now, let's talk about if I was to rework some of these things. This one is a little bit trickier because this class, a lot of people don't like, and it totally makes sense because it's one of those noob, it's kind of like the noob crusher kind of like thing, like the noob stomper kind of class. The same with like Juggernaut used to be that way, Mercenary is that way in a certain way, but it also attracts just a lot of noobs because it's actually easy to play. It's just one of those classes, right? And with that in mind, a lot of casuals are not going to agree, but I do think overall this right here probably shouldn't exist. I know a lot of assassin mains would be like, oh man, you're going to take away our damage. There was an era where we did not have augments, and this class having this right here made it leaks better in PvP than pretty much every other class in the game when it came to just raw damage output, including burst. It was like on par with 8p, which is pretty crazy to think about. And if we were ever to lose our augments again, our critical most likely would be okay now, so this wouldn't be as obnoxious, but it would still be really good. Now that our critical is normal, this just really honestly just makes it that much better. You're just able to do more damage pretty much all the time. No other class really has just a 20% crit passive there, and also at the same time you also on operative, for example, you have a 10% crit. That's an implant. It's a set bonus. If 10% is worth a set bonus, why is 20% just given as a talent point? Super weird. I don't really agree with this, but hey, it's in the game. It does increase your damage by a lot. Oftentimes I'll take this over the damage reduction option, but that's just my opinion. Of course, they're not likely to listen to this, but you know, when it comes to probability balance, this is probably not healthy. And typically when you go into critical passes, so for example, Shards of Mortis, we've already talked about this on my Sentinel video. Shards of Mortis literally breaks the game because it allows you to hit over 100% crit rate and kind of makes critical irrelevant to a point, which is just not healthy for designing and balance wise. But nonetheless, that is something completely different. And I'll move on for this one because, you know, my personal opinion on this one is just not going to be the same for everybody. Now this one, let's say this one doesn't exist, you're pretty much always going to take this one, so it's a no-brainer. But let's say this one stays a thing and you really want this one. I'd be fine with it only being 3% per stack. Honestly, it wouldn't be that bad. And or just buffing this in return for removing this, you know, that wouldn't be a bad option, but also at the same time, I feel like this option right here, this defense option should probably go, it would be like fade, AWDR, and this one, and make this baseline. That wouldn't be a bad lineup here, because then you can actually take the damage reduction, and you'd kind of force them to have a longer cloak and play a little bit more smart with their cloak, which is definitely an issue right now because you can run 2 cloaks. And not that I think 2 cloaks is overpowered or anything, I just think that, you know, it'd be a little bit more balanced of an option. Now, to be completely honest here, I do think the Overcharge Saber and Battle Readiness, I think this row is actually not terrible, but I do think that should probably just be baseline. I don't feel like it's a worthy thing of being a talent option. I wouldn't mind seeing for DPS to have the option to get Force Speed Absorb back again, even if it's only 25%, it would make a difference, and it would add some skill ceiling back into the class, which would be very interesting to see. Overall, not a big deal. I think the class could probably survive just fine without it, especially if we were able to take Visionary Defense a little bit easier without giving up too much damage. So for example, this. And this one's really interesting too, but I also do think that, honestly, it should probably be buffed. 1% heals, same for Marauder. It's not that great. If it was 3%, I think it would be a little too strong, but if it was 2%, I think it would actually be a little bit more valuable than what it currently is. Most of the time you'll want to take this one just because it gives you a auto crit for your white damage, but most of the time I'm not really playing that. I'm just playing May Cause Injury, which they would discharge, so I'll just find more value in this one so I can spam my abilities a little bit more often so I can get my discharge stacks immediately. We mostly have our opinions for these ones. This one's is pretty much the same for all the classes, except for Darkness, I believe. Now, if I was to make a mobility line, I do think this should probably just be flat out fused with Force Phase, but maybe without the Force Magnetism or the cooldown reduction of Force Speed be built into that, or just make it baseline. Honestly, that wouldn't be a terrible idea. So having the cooldown reduction, Mind Sap, and Force Will, which is your breaker, make that just a talent by itself, or maybe tie that in with a Force Speed Slow, and then have the Force Speed increase, and the Force Cloak thing could probably just be tied back into Fade, because that's what it usually, or originally was, I'm pretty sure. And then you have the 1 second just tied into Force Phase. I feel like that wouldn't be a bad solution, kind of like removing the need for this to exist, and then remaining a reason to have this, and remaining a reason to have this. And then this would be another good one. It'd be nice if we can actually afford to take this, so if this was somewhere else, that would be really nice. So for example, instead of having Battle Readiness, maybe have Kinetic Surge there instead. So instead of having like Force Regen, so you can spam your abilities a little bit more, or an extra auto crit, you could have the option to have more ability, which sometimes could just be a lot more useful. I think that would be a really tough lineup, and I would definitely have a hard time picking what I would want there. But I do think this row is dead. Pretty much never take this one, and this one's just not good enough to take over this one. This one's just way too good. And if you were to do what I suggested, which would basically take most of this away from this and fuse it into that one, and then take the slow, put it into that, there would be almost no reason to take any of the other ones here. So I really do feel like this one should be moved. That one should just get removed. This one should just be baseline. Yeah. And then this one should probably be part of that, which leaves these two. Honestly, these two are interesting, but also at the same time, what you could do is just leave it as 2 options. Honestly, there's no reason to have 3 options. Sometimes if you can't think of something, you don't really need it, you know? Sometimes some classes just don't need as much. I feel like a lot of these are forced and not well thought out and don't need to exist. Now going into this one, obviously I think Shroud should be baseline. It is a iconic ability for the class, but on top of this, On top of that, it's like one of its main defensives, so not being able to have access to that is just not very good. I do think if you're able to take Visionary Defense again, you could actually open up into not taking Shroud as much, which would be very interesting and very cool, which would allow, you know, classes to thrive a little bit more against Assassin, because Assassin having the ability to purge like this is quite frustrating. Now Whirlwind, honestly, I don't mind that the fact that they have the option to take Whirlwind. I did think with pruning that most mezzes should be removed from DPS. I feel like all of them, honestly, should probably be completely removed from all of DPS and only be available for tank and healer. So I'll hold my tongue about this one, honestly. I know a lot of people wouldn't agree with that, but hey, you're giving up Shroud for it, so I don't really personally care about this one too much. I do think that this probably just shouldn't exist, and like this whole row could just be completely deleted. And then, as I mentioned before, I think this one's not bad. I don't think this one belongs with that one. And I also don't feel like this belongs here either. So when it comes to like a top tier row, like Cloak of Resilience is really good. Don't get me wrong. However, I would put it on the value of usefulness as Fade. So I really wouldn't mind seeing this one actually get down there with those, but also at the same time, I do think the other ideal would be just fine. So for the top row, I don't really feel like the class needs something else to thrive. I think it has the core kit. I just think that the talent loadout for the class is bad. So I wouldn't really suggest much other changes for at least Deception. So with that out of the way, we're going to go to Serenity. We've already spent like 30 minutes on that one, so sorry. Anyway, Hatred is probably my favorite talent loadout we've had for DPS in quite a while, and we'll get into that right now. So the first thing that I want to talk about here is that you have a damage increase to your force and balance, which is nice. It's your death field. And then you also have a tactical if you're hitting somebody that's slowed with your force and balance or death field. It also increases your damage of that ability even further. All right, you're following me? Then you also have the 100% crit window. So this thing can hit really hard. The extra armor penetration also just allows you to do a little bit more damage if you're last rate, but also just do more damage in general. This one can be very good. I like this talent. I think it's a solid one. I think it's a well thought out one. Now when it comes to this one, I think this one's even more well thought out, and I just love it. There's like almost no times that I pretty much play without this. The reason why I like this one is because you're able to get 2 charges, and when you pop Recklessness, you have a extra charge. So technically in an opener, you have 3 death fields. So for example, if you're running the 100% crit opener with Shadowcraft, you can do a phase into death field, into Recklessness, into Eradicate, into death field, into death field. So it's really good. Does a lot of damage. It's a lot of internal damage, and it's a lot of AoE too. So it just feels really good. I think it's a good design. And whenever there is a lot of cleave and you get somebody killed, you're going to get a reset on it. And then your cooldown reduction for your Recklessness is going to go crazy. And you're going to get another reset from your Recklessness. So you're able to spam your death field a lot and cleave, and you can wipe teams with it. It feels really good. It makes Hatred feel a little bit more on par with Vengeance. Now this one seems kind of interesting, but for the most part, I would never take this. I don't think this is anywhere near as good as the other ones, so personally for me, it's not it. Now this one, you can already know my opinions on this row again. I think this one is just honestly better. This one can actually be really good, the 5-second root. Again, that's super nice for Hatred, considering you kind of cannot deal with people hitting you because you're so squishy. This is really nice for setting up cleave, but also at the same time, it's really nice for after you've already cleaved on them, keep them away from you. And then this, I think this is like the most abomination thing they've done for 7.0. You have no business opening up a Bleaching Strike. I'm just going to be completely honest with you, that is just not how Hatred works. That is just the wrong thing to do. And I really, really, really dislike that they did this. I really wish that they would have changed this or made it different for Hatred, because this is just wrong on so many levels. I do not enjoy this. I do not like this. I think this is a terrible ideal. Whoever decided this, no. Please don't do this again. Don't. Just don't. I'm going to be as nice as I can here. Just don't. I appreciate you for trying. Just don't. This honestly should just go back to being spike. If we're going to have spike, just give us spike back. It's honestly not that big of a deal. It's an extra button. We've got plenty of empty spots here. Most people aren't actually complaining about abilities like that. I know that the developers said their reasoning for pruning a lot of these abilities was that a lot of these abilities did the same thing as other abilities. Well, spike is kind of unique, and no, I don't think so. So honestly, just giving the option to have regular spike back would just be better in this scenario. And most of the time, hatred actually doesn't really need to use its spike that much, especially if you're running the 100% crit opener. You're probably not even going to use spike, so it's not the end of the world if they had it. Now going into this other row, I really enjoy this one too. So the 1 second dot, I think this is awesome. I think this is probably what should have happened to Madness instead of Shock Bomb, but Shock Bomb is actually pretty cool, so I'm not totally against it. But I would have rather seen this on Madness too. And then going for this next one, the critical hit chance for your periodic effects, which is your dots. This one is just overall a damage increase. It's like a really basic damage increase. It's pretty nice overall. I like this one too, but most of the time I'll take Destruction Ray because one, it's still classified as dot, so it means it goes through reflects. So for example, if Merc pops as reflect, you probably still kill them with this. And then the last one, this one, I just don't really find a situation where I can find use of this, but there are some times that you can, and when you do, it's quite nice. However, the initial damage of Sculpture is not super amazing. So most of the time, when you do get some value out of this, it's just not necessarily worth it. Now getting into the other row here, Overcharge Saber, I still feel like this should be just baseline even for hatred. Its durability is just not very good. Maybe even for hatred, maybe give it some damage reduction when you use it. But at the same time, you know, like I think it might need some passive DR over anything else. I pretty much always take this one because it's critical hit damage and critical hit chance. This means that everything that you do is just more effective. And then also you have a 10% increase to your product damaging effects. So that means your 1 second eradicate too. And having the extra force regen is super nice. And then our last talent here, this one is really interesting. It allows you to do some surprise burst, which is super deadly. Most of the time I don't recommend using this because actually getting this off is way too easy to interrupt and way too easy to stop. And if somebody knows that you're playing this, it's really not too hard for them to stop you from what you're running to do, because whenever you pop force potency, it's relatively obvious, especially when somebody uses eradicate twice on you and they're not particularly setting it up in a way that they can. There's a way that you can do that. You can use your first one and then you can use a reproc for it. Usually there's an 18-second-ish window there that would cause that, but for the most part, you know, most of the time people are not doing that, and the only way that they are is through this, and you can obviously see the buff when you actually use it, so people can track it that way too. Keeping the uptime for this is difficult, and also at the same time executing it is relatively difficult. So I think this is a balanced talent, but however, I just don't find it as useful as the one that's next to it. So I do feel like this is probably something that should probably revise. I think the uptime for this should be just a little bit better, but at the same time, you know, it's not terrible. I know a lot of people end up playing hatred and they try this talent and they think it's really good, and then they just don't do anything at the end screen and kind of fumble. There's a reason for that. You're not keeping your sustained damage up. Burst damage is cool, but you're playing a dot spec. Don't forget that. Now getting into 51 and above, we pretty much have already talked about this, and I'm going to refer the same things I said for Infiltration here. Now this is the one spec that I would find the 75% slow extremely valuable. So there would be, if this was fused together, I do think I would 100% take that. And then for the most part, my opinion still agrees. 5 seconds Shroud, I feel like that should be the option here. If anything, and have Shroud baseline, that would honestly be really good. Maybe different for Darkness by only giving it a 3-second Shroud. So if they do run the tactical, they still get third. What's that, I believe 9-second Shroud. Instead of having an 11-second, that would be a little obnoxious. And then that's pretty much it for Hatred. There's not like anything too crazy. I wouldn't really change most of this. I do think this should probably be baseline. When it comes to like actual defensive row, maybe get rid of this. I would love to see a passive DR option here. So kind of like force us off of taking AoE DR and or Fade. Fade is actually a decent damage increase, especially in Cleave when we're running Shadowcraft. So if there was an option to get passive DR, let's say like 3% stacking up to 3 times on periodical critical hits, just like Madness's variant, but a little bit weaker. I feel like that would be really good, but also at the same time, if it was just as strong as Madness's variant, I wouldn't complain about that either, because it is a melee and it is a frontliner. So that would be incredibly good. Arguably, people would be complaining about Hatred 10 times more than they would be complaining about Madness, even though Madness is definitely a plague on PvP right now. But that would really make Hatred not only good, but it would definitely make it meta almost instantly for anybody that could play Hatred pretty well. And it would also probably cause a lot of rerollers. Anyway, other than that, I think same opinions with Infiltration. Now let's go to Darkness, which is Connect Combat. The main thing that I would change here, obviously this doesn't need to exist. I didn't really like Force Wave being up here, but I understand why it is. So we have different talents here. Instead of going over this, we're going to basically take the same ideals going on up here, right? The only difference is that I probably... Yeah, we'll just skip over it for now. So we'll start with the bottom here. Alright, so antagonizing debris. This is a cool one, but I think 10% is just not enough, honestly. And I also feel like it should channel faster. I do feel like if we're going to do a little bit more focus on single target damage, make it channel faster, honestly, or make it a separate global cooldown ability. So like when you start casting it, it casts, and then you can also use other abilities at the same time. Kind of like how Shuriken works. That would be really cool. Wouldn't be against that. I would like that. That would be very interesting, and it would be the first of its kind, technically. So that would be cool. That could be an option. And then this one's also kind of interesting, but it requires a taunt on the target. The 20% increased damage is actually not that much, so most of the time you wouldn't even find reason to take it over this one. But there are some situations where you probably could find value, but the damage difference between these two is actually very close. The main reason you'd probably want this one is because of force regen, but at the same time, you know, it's silly. Most of the time that you probably are going to use this, you're going to find more value out of just running the AoE one, an example. I think this one is actually so incredibly powerful, and the fact that it arcs retroactively with people coming into your range is incredible. It's actually a very smart AoE, and I really enjoy this one. Yeah, I don't know. This row is crazy. I think this is just super incredibly strong. This one could be so much better if you can like make it its own GCD, or you can make it go off really fast and maybe increase it by like 10%. So it'd be like 20%. So it'd be actually like an ability that feels like it does damage when you're actually using a single target, because when you're using the AoE version, you're hitting it multiple times on multiple people, and it still doesn't feel like it's very strong. And then this one, you know, honestly, not really sure what they could do to make this one good, but you know, you don't always need 3 options. Going into this one, I don't agree with this one existing at all. This used to be a passive. This is literally gutting damage on darkness for literally no reason whatsoever. The only thing they added here was the cooldown reduction on your mind control, or the extend, I guess. I don't like this at all. I do think this should go back to being baseline. And then spike, I'm completely fine with because it does give you damage reduction. I don't mind it being a talent here. This one also just still does suck. Obviously, I do think the force speed should probably just be tied to this, or I mean immersion. And then the slow should just get tied to that. And then obviously the movement speed should go back to being tied to fade like it used to be. That's my personal opinion on that one. I've already said that about infiltration, so my opinion on that one still stays the same. So it would literally just give you an option between spike. So you'd probably have to redesign this row or just put spike somewhere else, which I think spike would be completely fine to be in this row. Now going into this next option here, I think this is probably one of the most well thought out selection rows that I've seen in a very long time. I say that in a very long time. It's probably because I just don't play this one very much. It's more so that it's one of the more well thought out rows compared to a lot of the other classes in the game, I guess you could say. So this one, let's just start off explaining this one. So each time you basically have a Dark Ward charge consumed, the cooldown reduction of mass mind control goes into place for 2 seconds. So you'll get like a 2-second tick off of it. So each time that you break one of those, you have 15 stacks of that, and you're able to spam it pretty much all the time. You get a lot of cooldown reduction on your mass mind control. And each time a Kinetic Ward or a Dark Ward is broken by damage, it deals 3,500 damage to nearby targets. Obviously the scales of gear, I'm pretty sure, so this can do more damage. It also creates a lot of threat, which is great for PvE, and finishes the cooldown of force speech and slow time, which is this is slow time or slow time, and this is force speech. This is your discharge. So wither and discharge. This one is really cool, and I really like this one. This one can be really strong, especially if people are kind of like directly hitting you or they're popping your Dark Ward a lot. Now, when we go to this one, for example, I think this one's also really good. Each time you consume a charge of Kinetic Ward, which is Dark Ward, the cooldown reduction of Force Cloak goes into effect of basically negative 2 seconds. So whenever you pop this, it'll be 2 minutes, and it go down by 2 seconds for each Dark Ward, which is not bad. But also at the same time, you get an accuracy debuff of 20% for 6 seconds. This is for both white and yellow damage. This is really good. Don't feel like I need to explain that one. Obviously, accuracy debuffs are overpowered. I think all accuracy debuffs should have been pruned at 7.0. Don't like this still exists, but it's a very good and very well thought out one compared to the other ones. So there's reasons to take both of these. And then this one is probably my favorite. This one is really interesting. So each time you consume a charge of Kinetic Ward or Dark Ward, the cooldown of force potency is decreased by 2 seconds. If Kinetic Ward is broken on you, the damage by damage, it grants you 1 charge of force potency or recklessness to you. That one, pretty self-explanatory. That one's really good. Increases your damage a decent bit, and I just think this row is just really good. Now going into 43, consuming a charge of force potency grants nearby allies potent defense, increasing the damage rush of 5% per stack. Potent defense stacks 3 times and lasts for 10 seconds. I think this is really good. So if you're playing like 8v8s, like hardcore 8v8s, like it would be ranked or a challenge or whatever, and you're trying to make the most out of your actual like team mitigation, recklessness and cooldown on recklessness. So like this, which one is it? Oh yeah, you would be taking this one. Basically, your recklessness would be like your best cooldown and cleave. So if somebody pops polarity, you guys are getting nuked on. So somebody actually pops this around in the cleave that everybody's getting hit. Getting this 15% damage reduction on somebody, it's massive. Especially if you can get it on everybody near you. But yeah, this is just a really good talent. I think this is awesome. It actually gives more utility to Assassin tank, but also gives a way for it to be a secondary role tank where it's more focused on trying to help your team mitigate rather than play the full function of an actual tank, where it's just constantly mitigating everything. So obviously you would sit on your recklessness for the intention of burst windows or AoE burst windows. Other than that, we have this one. Honestly, baseline, still understand it's not that overpowered to have it not baseline. And then this one's really interesting. So each time you deal damage to a target, you have mind control, you restore 2 force. Not a big deal, but you heal for 2% of your maximum health. This synergizes with the AoE talent and the AoE decorating bolts, or what is it called here? Cascading debris. So this one can actually get you a lot of healing, and I think this one's really interesting. You can also tie it with this one, which will allow you to get your AoE talent back up more often, which will allow you to heal even more. It's a very cool talent. I really liked it. And for the most part, this row is interesting. I don't think battle readiness needs to be here. It could just be these 2 talents, and it would be a marvelous selection. I think it's really cool, and there's definitely reasons to take both of them. So like these 2, really good, except for battle readiness. And then going into this one, honestly, I think GC immunity, honestly, just make it part of the ability already. This ability is so bare. 2% defense chance for 12 seconds. Like, really? Like, most of the classes now are not white damage anymore. So most of the time, the value that you get out of deflection is not from popping it itself, but it's the CC immunity tied to it. And for darkness, it's the aura, or aura, whatever, English, around it. Let's see if I can find it real quick. It's been a little bit since I've actually tried to find the passive. I know what it looks like on Imperial, but on Republic, ooh. God forbid. There it is. Deflection grants pulsating force, causing all enemies within 8 meters to deal 15% less force and tech damage. This effect lasts for a duration of deflection. So obviously there is value there for tank to pop that simply just because of that alone. This actually makes it really good. So for example, if you're taking this, and well, obviously you already have this baseline, but if you have this and you're going to get some pyro PT and you pop this, either pop explosive fuel, that pyro PT is probably not going to do much damage at all. Kind of like completely neuter them. Same with like how do you put it? Lethality. Huge, super valuable. Really enjoyed that one. This row, again, you know, same thing. I think this should be baseline. And then these rows, my opinion, still stay the same. The only difference is with this row, maybe instead of having this, which I only take for the ability to root somebody so I can get my AoE decorating volts a little bit more. But most of the time I'll take lift. It's just an AV, so I don't really find the value of lift, so I just don't bother. They definitely can put something else here, but I mean, honestly, cleaving cut doesn't need to exist, but also at the same time, it's not really hurting anybody having it. And when it comes to these 2, they're not a terrible choice. I actually think it's kind of balanced. I do in general like the idea of crowd control being aligned together, defensive being aligned together, offensives being aligned together. Same thing that we were talking about when I went over Sentinel. So I believe in closing when I was talking about Sentinel was that there really should be a defensive line, a utility line, and maybe 2 offensive lines. For tanks, it should probably be a little bit different. It should be 2 defensive lines and probably maybe 2 utility. But ultimately, I don't think this is a bad one. I think this one's actually pretty good. I think this is out of all 3 specs for Assassin and Shadow. I think the Darkness was like the one that had the most thought put into it, and it's probably just because a lot of people just ended up playing Shadow Tank and Sin Tank on maybe the development team, or they knew that a lot of people played it in general and they had to not butcher it completely. Anyway, that's pretty much it for Shadow and Assassin. Sorry that there was a lot of pauses and mutes. coughing, and I wanted to get this video out. I know that a lot of people want to see my opinions on some of the other classes. Assassin was the other class that I wanted to tackle right away. This is a relatively important class to me. This is like the second class that I ever made it in this game. My character called Erased. That was my second character I ever made on this account. I'll say my Vanguard, and then my Sork was like my first, or something like that. I think it was my Vanguard. Oh, maybe, okay, I have the order wrong. Vanguard, Sork, then Sen. It's just like the third. Technically the second, because I did not finish my Vanguard. But other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I appreciate you guys for watching. If you guys have any opinions on Shadow or Assassin, feel free to leave them in the comments. This is just a opinion piece at the end of the day, so don't take it too seriously. There are some opinions that I have that you're not going to align with, and that's totally fine. I'm not a content creator for SWTOR. I'm not in any way able to really influence them. I'm just somebody that makes videos, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys again in another video soon.